Now, I don't know what citizen watches contracted during the pandemic, but I want some. They went into it looking like this and came out looking like this. With that kind of glow up, I'd give Brad Pitt a run for his money. Founded in 1918, Citizen has always been at the forefront of wristwatch technology, with numerous innovations to their name, and until recently, I think that's mainly what they were known for. High-performance watches with cool features at a good price. But in recent years, they've been releasing more and more watches that excel in the visual department too, and that's when they really piqued my interest. Previously, Citizen's cluttered design language and near universally large sizing never really spoke to me, but this post-pandemic resurgence has really changed the game. Nowadays, they offer a much wider assortment of sizes and styles, meaning there's finally something in there for virtually every wrist size and taste. You no longer have to seemingly choose between quality and looks, you can have both. Crucially, many of these new additions are in the lower price brackets, which I think is far more exciting than the high-end luxury stuff I'd need to sell an organ to obtain. So I figured it was finally time for me to make a list of the best Citizen watches under 500 quid, or about $600 US. Over the last few months, I've spent countless hours and thousands of pounds exploring the Citizen catalogue, narrowing it down to 20 special picks that I think cover all bases for us budget-conscious buyers. And you know what? I think this could be my best yet. It turns out, in addition to the more popular models, I found many surprisingly good hidden gems you've probably never heard of, so stay tuned so you don't miss them. All of them will be linked in the video description if you're feeling curious, and unlike almost every other video on this topic it seems, I've actually had hands-on experience with every single one of these, so I can share some honest pros and cons for each along the way. And that's mainly thanks to our sponsor dailywatch.com, who made this video possible. Daily Watch's curated watch accessories are the perfect way to store, protect, and display your favorite watches. And we've put together a great deal for you, my Ben's Watch Club viewers. You can use code Ben's Watch Club at dailywatch.com to get a whopping 15% off any of their high-quality products. This even includes their best-selling personalized watch rolls and mats, which can be engraved with any word of your choosing, a perfect custom gift for yourself or a fellow watch lover. The Daily Watch team, the same guys behind the world's largest watch social media account, recently showed me some of their latest products, including a crazy steel-legged UFO display stand and this elegant velvet-lined hexagon watch box featuring 6 slots and a ridiculously nice Saffiano leather outer for maximum durability. Of course, they've got many more exciting products to explore, some of which you'll see holding our Citizens in this video. Check out dailywatch.com in the video description and use my code Ben's Watch Club to get their top-notch gear at the best price possible. They've got outstanding reviews across the board, so I'm really proud to have them as a sponsor. That's dailywatch.com. Now, I've split this video into segments for easy browsing. No JDM watches in this one, I'll save those for a separate list. The obvious place to start is sports watches. Citizen really kicked off this revitalization with the integrated bracelet Tsuyosa. Boasting a Rolex-like appearance at an even lower price than the Tissot PRX, this model was always going to prove popular. And the sheer number of colors this one now ships in is a testament to how successful it must have been. For around £300, or often much less on grey market sites, the Tsuyosa offers decent build quality and a trendy appearance for a reasonable price, a pretty tempting combination. Unlike most fashion-forward watches, this doesn't feel at all cheap in the hands. It's actually got quite a weighty, assuring feel thanks to the substantial steel case and automatic movement, combined with the steel bracelet, which itself offers a reasonable range of adjustment holes to give you a comfortable fit. Just keep in mind that these integrated bracelets do limit future strap options. While far from the most original design, it's a pretty versatile one, and some of the punchier colours like this bright yellow have a lovely sheen that elevates the look even further. Overall, the Tsuyosa gives a fantastic first impression. Unlike similarly priced watches from brands like Seiko, it also offers a sapphire crystal which gives you the optimal level of scratch resistance, though it's far from perfect. The sapphire Citizen is using here introduces a lot of haziness, which is much more apparent in dimmer models like this green one, where the reduced clarity and contrast are on full display. This green doesn't look nearly as vibrant as in the stock images. For this reason, I'd stick to the brighter models if you can, which effectively sidestep this issue and look much more like the photos. Funnily enough, the green model is actually a different sized version of the Tsuyosa, which was recently added to the lineup. The standard version is 40mm wide, while this new one is only 37mm, meaning it's better for small wrists. Both versions are still fairly chunky, which is partly due to the movement powering them. This is the Miyota 8210, an entry-level automatic that is known to be quite thick. Despite its popularity, I'm not the biggest fan of the regular Tsuyosa, partly due to the unsightly Cyclops placed atop the crystal and the awkwardly positioned dial text, which I think sits too close to the markers. The rotor noise from this Miyota can also be annoying at times. That's why I prefer this version instead, the Tsuyosa Small Seconds. This model fixes all those issues for a comparable price and looks more premium in the process thanks to its elaborate guilloche dial pattern, which adds an extra layer of texture and depth. The rearranged text is better positioned, the dial is super symmetrical thanks to the absence of a date window, and even the movement has been switched for something less anemic. And here is a Miyota 8322A, which sounds similar and in some ways is similar to the previous Miyota 8210, but boasts a longer 60-hour power reserve and a far quieter hollowed-out rotor, in addition to enhanced decoration, which you can view through the exhibition rear. While it still shares the same unimpressive case as the regular Tsuyosa, the bracelet is quite different. Here you have a butterfly clasp as opposed to the stamped metal clasp on the previous model. It's not quite as adjustable, but I think suits the look better and at least offers some shrunken links to compensate for the lack of micro adjustment holes. It also just feels higher quality, which I guess echoes the entire theme of the small second Tsuyosa. To me, it's just a more refined and slightly more luxurious Tsuyosa for a slight price bump. For the most part, it's objectively better and looks much more expensive, with my only nitpicks being that the recessed crown isn't quite as flush as that on the regular Tsuyosa, and the design is perhaps a touch less versatile. At present, it's also only available in a limited selection of colours, but all three I think are absolute bangers. If this one ever releases in 37mm, it'll probably be glued to my wrist. All versions of the Tsuyosa share the same 580M water resistance rating, but if it's aquatic performance you're after, you'll find more success with options later on this list. While I prefer the small second Tsuyosa, lots of people seem to favour the Zenshin integrated bracelet watches instead. These are a range of titanium-cased watches that initially launched under the Forza moniker here in the UK. There are three main models to pick from, including a Miyota-powered automatic, an EcoDrive Solar 3-hander, and even a solar chronograph for those of you wanting something more substantial. The appeal of these Zenshin watches is clear to see. Loads of YouTubers were calling these Grand Seiko killers, primarily due to the highly textured dials, which are pretty impressive from a distance. They almost have this washy paper-style look, which is typically only reserved for much more expensive watches. Additionally, the Zenshin is pretty thin compared to the Tsuyosa, all while offering double the water resistance. The cherry on top, as far as reviewers were concerned, was the super titanium construction. You get the lightness of titanium combined with Citizen's case hardening treatment, which supposedly offers 5 times the hardness or 5 times the scratch resistance of stainless steel with 40% less weight. Almost every reviewer was echoing these claims without conducting any meaningful testing. But I did the testing. Sadly, I discovered that most super titanium watches, even Duratect branded ones, actually perform marginally worse than stainless steel as far as scratches go. Essentially, Citizen's marketing is highly misleading. There are several secret tiers of this stuff which they don't differentiate between on any Western site. Most super titanium models scratch and perform akin to completely untreated titanium watches and lack any enhanced scratch resistance over them. It's a placebo effect. For the full details, check out the video I'll leave on the end screen of this one. That's not to say titanium is necessarily bad. Watches using this are still very light and comfortable. These Zenshin watches basically disappear on the wrist. Just don't expect anything more than that. Citizen really needs to sort out its messaging. Out of these three, I like the 3-hander the best. It's the lowest cost, most compact, and has the cleanest overall look. You'd never know it was solar either, given the level of detail on offer. I love this green tone too, it's definitely my pick of the bunch. All versions ship with a titanium bracelet, which keeps the balance in check, though the clasp isn't quite as good as some others on this list. At full price, these range from £400 to £500, but I've already seen these retailing for considerably less on sites like Amazon, which I'll also link below. If you manage to somehow grab one for under £300, they're a very good buy. Still, I lean more towards the Tsuyosa Small Seconds, which I think is prettier overall. If you're on a tighter budget, Citizen actually has some surprisingly viable lower cost options that YouTubers haven't been shilling en masse, at least until they see this video. The first of these is the little known Odyn. This model recently released in select territories, and for closer to £200, often below that on grey market sites, it looks absolutely baller. It's a solar-powered sports watch reminiscent of the AP Royal Oak, with a steel case, octagonal bezel, and even a shiny waffle-like dial, giving a comparable overall look for a fraction of the price. That's not to say it's a direct copy. Unlike the AP, or most other AP clones for that matter, this has a standard 22mm bracelet fitting, so you can change the strap, as well as an engraved bezel and a dial surface that's somewhat of an illusion. Citizen has pulled some subtle tricks here to help elevate the Odyn's appearance, the smartest of which is the slim chamfer running around the inside of the bezel, right next to where the crystal sits. It's tilted inwards, which is the opposite way from the norm, providing inverted reflections compared to the rest of the watch. This also helps frame the dial and works nicely in tandem with the circular engravings beneath. No, that wasn't a slip of the tongue. It's got a square pattern, sure, but that's actually a 2D print combined with radial rings that fan out from the center. You can only see these if you look really closely, as I can get with this lens. This arrangement is most likely to do with the EcoDrive solar technology, where it takes in light through the dial, but the final effect gives the type of striking, clean sheen that you only tend to get with solar watches. It's a side effect that's actually quite welcome. Under some artificial lights, you even get a little bit of that oil-like iridescence shining through, which is also pretty cool. I think this watch actually has a better case shape than both the previous watches, despite costing notably less. It's fairly slim for a bezel design, and the angular lugs taper down and hug the arm nicely with no obvious gaps. The only major drawbacks are the crystal and bracelet. The former is only mineral, which is below par for the price. It's not like this is a 50 quid watch or something. It does at least avoid the cloudiness present on the previous two on this list, with a far clearer look at the dial beneath. The bracelet, meanwhile, is only comprised of folded links, which isn't nearly as good as what you can get from some of the Chinese brands, or on the Tsuyosa for that matter. The adjustment range is respectable though. The standard Odyn measures 41mm across with a 48mm lug-to-lug and a 9.8mm thickness, meaning it's also best suited to average or maybe larger wrists, especially with the relatively wide bracelet. Luckily, I also stumbled upon what is effectively a smaller version of this watch. This one seems to go by the nickname Metropolitan and comes in at 38mm wide with a mere 45mm lug-to-lug. Admittedly, it's not quite as impressive as the Odyn. The dial forgoes the grid line pattern, and overall, it has more simplistic detailing. Still, it retains the strong sunburst and all the other specs, often for substantially less cash, so it's a strong budget choice nonetheless. I think the Odyn is still the real fashion watch killer of the two. It has some fun and flashiness to it, while still looking way more premium than 99% of designer watches you see in jewelry stores. If you're considering buying a sporty Armani, Michael Kors, or Hugo Boss watch, just buy this instead. You won't regret it, the quality difference is pretty stark. Alternatively, if you want to head further down the minimalist rabbit hole, the futuristic Axiom may be more to your taste. I featured this one once before on Ben's Watch Club and can't help but share it again, given it looks nothing like a typical Citizen. This one has this extreme space-age design with a case shape and bracelet that fit together seamlessly, and a wafer-thin profile that wears extremely flush to the wrist. Surprisingly though, this isn't the thinnest watch on this list. Wait until you see that one. It's got a stunning bright blue dial that's a real attention grabber with a punchier tone than most blue watches out there, which tend to lean more towards navy. One thing to note is that in my footage, you can see right through to the movement beneath as if it's translucent or something. In reality, this is just a side effect of one of my lens filters. To the naked eye, the dial appears much more solid. Overall, it's a quirky yet attractive watch that's perfect for you Star Wars lovers out there. In fact, Citizen has since released a surprisingly good hyperdrive version of the Axiom in partnership with Lucasfilm, but it is pricier at around £300, whereas the standard Axiom can usually be had for much closer to £200, which I think is fairer for a watch that only has a mineral crystal. Both share the same 40mm width, which is quite misleading, as the thinness and short lug-to-lug do make it wear smaller. The clasp can also be problematic. The bracelet links are solid and small, but the adjustment range is limited to link-sized increments. Still, this is a watch that's flown under the radar for a while now, and it could be a very exclusive addition to your collection. Something that's likely to be a bit less exclusive is Citizen's legendary Promaster line of watches. These have a great history, a proven military track record, and come in all sorts of shapes and sizes to boot. The most abundant and lowest cost of these is the NY0040. At one point in time, these could be had for around £130 or £140, but that's since ballooned to around £200, which makes it a little less tempting compared to others on this list. Nonetheless, the NY0040 does have some notable strengths and a whole bunch of charm. The most notable of these is the case. I still refuse to believe that this case is almost 42mm wide. I mean, that's what my calipers are telling me, but the math doesn't add up. It plops so nicely onto my skinny arm, you could have told me this were 38mm and I'd have believed you. While the finishing is run-of-the-mill, it has a much more distinctive tub-like structure and a bezel that's narrower than the main body, which surely contributes to this effect. Large wrist, small wrist, anything in between, you could probably pull this watch off. if you like the styling that is. Indeed, the NY0040 is very much a product of its time, with this navy version in particular looking straight out to the 1990s with a dated denim-like backdrop and coral accents. If you like the 90s, this may tickle your fancy, but if not, it may be worth steering towards some of the other colours instead. The black version has aged a lot better, and they used to do a fully loomed variant too, though that one appears to be discontinued. With a decent strap, an ISO rated 200 meters of water resistance, a rock-solid bezel, and a Miyota 8204 automatic movement, this is one of the most reliable watches ever, according to numerous long-time owners in my reviews comment section. If you can grab one for the right price, it's still a hardy option that won't let you down. But for roughly the same cost, you can pick up this instead, the much newer NY0120. This is a modern interpretation of a 70s Promaster design with a traditionally placed 3 o'clock crown and a heavily textured gradient dial that's available in a much wider variety of colours. I think for the most part, the NY0120 feels like a more premium watch than the previous NY0040. The dial looks substantially classier with reduced wackiness and a surface that looks much closer to that on many higher-end dive watches. Admittedly, the whole layout here is more predictable and vanilla than the last one, but overall, I do think it's more stylish, and the lightly domed crystal also gives it some added flair. Despite the visual overhaul, it still boasts the same ISO-rated water performance as the previous Promaster, as well as a no-nonsense bezel. These Promaster bezels never tend to sound the best, but they are absolutely rock solid when you move them with no backplay. The NY0120 can also be purchased with a nicely integrated brushed bracelet that features a great clasp with a ratcheting diver's extension. It also has some mini links, so finding the perfect fit won't be a problem. I haven't tried a braceleted version of the older watch, but from what I can tell, this newer one is just substantially better for the price. Now, my main gripes with this model are pretty easy to spot. Firstly, I think the handset is a little too short for this design. But more importantly, the whole package feels chunkier than it probably should be. Despite being narrower than the previous one, it looks a whole lot bigger on wrist, partially due to the 13.9mm thickness. It uses just the same movement as last time, they should have kept it just as thin. The brushing used throughout is also quite boring for a watch at this price. It's not bad, it's just not very intricate. Still, this one feels even hardier than the last one, and I particularly enjoy the way the curved crystal plays with the light, even if it's only mineral. As you can see, it provides somewhat of a liquefied look, as if the dial is the seabed and the glass is the water's surface. While the NY0120 already fits larger wrists really well, if you're prepared to take things to the extreme, you can obtain some equally extreme performance. Meet the Promaster BJ8050, also known as the Ecozilla. This solar-powered monstrosity is built about as well as the name suggests, with an enormous 48mm case and enough water resistance to star in a Captain Nemo movie. This is ISO rated to 300 meters, but I imagine it could go a whole lot further. Sadly, I don't have a great deal of footage of this one. I ended up selling it right before I planned this video, but the brief clips I do have tell you all you need to know. This thing is a complete tank that's a guaranteed conversation starter. Of course, there are some more restrained options out there too, including a string of other EcoDrive Promasters. The most notable of these, I'd say, is the EO 2021, which is a unisex 36.4mm Promaster that's a great fit for small wrists. To be honest, I didn't love this one when I first received it. It's not got the most inventive design out there, and rather like the Tsuyosa, the lower text is a bit too low for my liking. The dial and case finishing are also nothing special compared to sub-$200 Chinese brands, but I have to say, it's remarkably refreshing to have a dive watch that actually fits my 6¼ inch wrist properly, especially paired with a design that isn't just directly ripped from a luxury watch. Now, the Solar Promaster also comes in a larger 44mm version, which is quite a discrepancy. Surely they'll release a mid-sized gap filler in the future. For now, this model offers a similar package to the NY0040, albeit with some modernized design tweaks and a solar movement. It's maybe slightly better looking overall, partly thanks to the slightly darker dial tone, and this one has definitely grown on me. The polyurethane strap, while comfortable, does limit this to strictly casual use, so I wouldn't say it's quite as versatile out of the box as the likes of the NY0120. If you're more into the larger model, it might also be worth considering the AW1598, which is a similar 43mm piece with a slimmer, sexier appearance, at the cost of some water resistance. If you really fancy treating yourself though, the Fujitsubo is the most obvious higher-end choice within this price bracket. Now, this one was pretty divisive at release and actually wouldn't have qualified for this video. Many reviewers shilled this like the second coming of Christ, while others panned the rudimentary case design and what they deemed boring styling, all for a launch price approaching £700 or $800. And I can see where both sides were coming from. Like some of the cheaper divers, the case here is still simplistic, with an entirely brushed finish throughout, and the dial also looks akin to many existing Citizen and Seiko dive models, with a high contrast color scheme, coin edge bezel, and boxy markers. It really does look like the stereotypical 70s dive watch, and that's basically because it is. The Fujitsubo is effectively a reissue of the 1977 Challenge dive watch, updated with modern materials and an improved movement. It's primarily known as the Fujitsubo rather than the Challenge diver because it's a nod to a very specific unit that reportedly washed up on an Australian beach in 1983 after several years in the Pacific Ocean. This watch was caked in barnacles but still functioned, hence the nickname Barnacle, which translates directly to Fujitsubo in Japanese. A marketer's dream scenario if I've ever seen one. So it's not the most historically significant timepiece, but it's admittedly quite a compelling story, and so Citizen has recreated it almost one-to-one in the looks department. While not the most exciting, I do think this watch oozes class and timelessness. Partly that's due to some of the tweaks Citizen has made to this reissue. Firstly, they've gone for an unusual faceted sapphire crystal that's actually domed on the underside, which gives it a far more impressive look than the standard domed glass used on the original. Additionally, the movement in this reissue is among the best on this list. It's the Miyota 9051, a high-beat automatic with a 3.9mm thickness. This gives you a tasty combination of a smooth sweeping second hand and a slimmer profile than the other mechanical divers on this list. What's more, the dial also boasts a gorgeous glossy sheen to it, reminiscent of enamel. Unsure if it's actually enamel, by the way, they don't mention it. But the final result really looks luxurious. Just like with PC monitors, you usually can't get such a deep black on matte dials, and this just looks head and shoulders above most other choices below 500 quid. Indeed, these days, you can typically grab the Fujitsubo for several hundred less than it launched at, which makes many of the criticisms a complete non-issue. One issue that does remain is the bezel. It looks good from a top, sure, but its action is underwhelming for the price, which isn't aided by the surprisingly low level of grip. Its polished presentation also sticks out compared to the all-matte case. The original Challenge diver had polished flanks, which suited the layout better. Surprisingly, for a 70s diver, the original was wider than you might think at 40mm. This new model is closer to 41mm, but wears just like a 40, with a 48.5mm lug-to-lug. That means chances of overhang are pretty low. You can also grab this one in blue if you want a look that closer matches the original. That one comes on a titanium bracelet instead. I have no idea how scratch resistant this super titanium is compared to that on the Zenshin. Sadly, I don't have the budget to check, but it does have a much lighter steel-like tone this time, which is great, and it retains the same comfortable on-wrist lightness. If this one fit me better, I would certainly be keeping it. Sadly, chronographs never tend to fit me, but they're Citizen's bread and butter, so I had to put at least a few on this list. Of course, there's the Zenshin Chrono I briefly mentioned at the start, and there are a few things worth noting about that one. It's got the cool textured dial, and it does have a swanky appearance, but I'd probably stick with the white or the light blue if you really like it. The salmon dial, well, it looks ill, that's the best way to describe it. The stock images show this nice, strong gold-like tone, but in the flesh, it's much pastier with a red-pink hue that doesn't look nearly as nice. It's probably more accurate to the name, but it's still yucky. I'd also recommend shopping around for the best deal, as 499 quid seems like a lot considering the titanium debacle I exposed earlier. Aside from that, there are two more chronographs that really stood out to me. The first is the Tsuno Bullhead chronograph. This new budget-friendly quartz piece can usually be had for less than £200 and also looks darn good from a distance. It's an attractive retro-inspired piece with those distinctive pushers attached at the top rather than the side. It comes in two old money colorways and is crucially one of the few sub 40mm Citizen chronographs out there. It's a shade under 38mm wide. Despite being incredibly chunky, like many other bullhead style chronographs, it is still quite palatable for small arms. If I can get away with it, you probably can too. There's also a similar bullhead for the Japanese market, however, I think this version is comfortably the sexier of the two. Nevertheless, despite the good cost to looks ratio, it does fall short in other areas. Firstly, despite being a stylistic match, the bracelet is pretty shoddy for the price. only performing a touch better than that on cheap Casios. Additionally, the specs are mediocre at best, with a mineral crystal and only 5 bar water resistance. In a similar vein, I'm not sure why they didn't make this thinner, especially given it's only using a quartz movement. True, this blocky shape is akin to the vintage models, but I think they could have modernized it while maintaining that similar theming. A trimmed down, better finished case certainly wouldn't have gone amiss. I included it nonetheless, as I think this is the sort of watch that could be a good buy, only if you love it or can get it at a substantial discount, at which point it makes much more sense. Now, I wanted to make sure I slotted in at least one of the more militaristic text-filled chronographs, given they take up such a massive portion of the Citizen collection. My choice is the newly released CA4660 Promaster Air Navihawk, which I've also seen listed as the Promaster Sky in some regions. To my eyes, this is easily in the upper echelon of Citizen's chronograph range, with a far better design and nicer dial proportions than most of their repertoire. In fact, this appears to be a shrunken version of the massive 46mm Promaster Air AT, which I think is a great move. I'm sure there are many of you like me who've always wanted to try one of these Citizen Pilot's watches, mainly because they're just so widely recommended online, but until now I've been utterly walled off by the sizing. I mean, this distribution of sizes is great for large arms, and that's about it. The new Air Navihawk distills this same design language down into a more widely appreciable 40mm package that significantly reduces the clunkiness and the chances of overhang. Now, this size reduction does impact functionality. Small text on a 46mm watch will always be more legible than tiny text on a 40mm watch. Still, I'd wager that 99% of the people buying these Pilot watches have never seen the inside of a cockpit in their life, at which point a bit of extra squinting doesn't exactly matter. The stylistic improvements are well worth the trade-off in my opinion. I think this is a better buy than the Seiko Speed Timer even. It's got a far nicer case shape, a snazzier dial, and overall a more character-rich design for far less money. Indeed, while it launched in the US at a whopping $595 this one was immediately available for hundreds less on grey market sites. So yeah, the price, which was initially a barrier for me given it lacks radio control or any other advanced functions, immediately became a non-issue, so long as you're willing to accept a retailer warranty rather than a manufacturer's one. 200-meter water resistance here, a sapphire crystal, a decent bracelet, and it ships in 3 distinctive colors, with this silver white being my favorite. The only thing holding this one back is availability, as it's not ready yet in some regions. Outside of the Navi ranges, there are a fair few other military-style watches worth considering. At the lower end of the price spectrum, there are 2 I like, one for small wrists and one for larger wrists. The first is the Garrison BM8180-03E. I tried this one a few years ago, and at the time, it was pretty much the only Citizen watch that fit me. Even now, the Garrison remains a pretty versatile field pilot watch hybrid that's one of the best reviewed watches on the entire Citizen website. Barely anyone has a bad thing to say about this piece because it's got most bases covered. It's low cost, it's fairly compact at 37mm, which is often preferred for a field watch. It's slim, has a safe, albeit crowd-pleasing dial, and boasts useful extras such as a solar-powered movements, strong water resistance, and a very grippy crown. The strap here is okay. It's not the highest quality material, but does offer leather backing for comfort, as well as reinforced holes to aid longevity. This is only a mineral crystal, but for the price, it's hard to complain. For something bigger, there's also an alternative version in the Garrison range, codenamed BM8560. This one leans more into the pilot watch theming, and has a case size more representative of that function at 41.9mm. In essence, this is like a beefier version of the previous one, with upgraded specs at an increased retail price. You get some upgrades including a sapphire crystal, a better finished dial with enhanced texture, and a slightly better strap with an angular buckle. There's also the matter of the case material. This is another of the super titanium watches, so it should technically be another upgrade over the previous steel-cased Garrison. It will wear lighter despite being larger, which is great, but the accompanying scratch resistance claims shouldn't be taken at face value for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Even with this caveat, I think still a solid casual all-rounder. Gives you a smart, traditional look with extreme legibility and no maintenance headaches. I'm not a fan of the day-date wheel, I must admit, but it's certainly among the better Citizen watches I've encountered. The colour combinations here are excellent too, and should go well with a variety of outfits. Still, I think the Promaster Super Tough is arguably a better alternative. Now, my wife hates the look of this thing, I'm going to be honest, but I definitely have a soft spot for the extreme utilitarian design offered up by this very unique timepiece. In fact, it's hard to know exactly how to describe it. It's kind of like a pilot's watch, is kind of like a field watch, but it's also kind of like a dive watch, especially given the diver's extension on the bracelet. What I can tell you for sure is this watch has been engineered to smash its way through anything and everything you can throw at it. For starters, it's got an unbreachable monocoque case design with no removable rear. That's right, this thing is so sealed that you need to crack the bezel and crystal off to get inside it, helping secure it to an advertised 300-meter water resistance rating. I guess it's also fewer parts that can go wrong if you drop it. Luckily, you won't need to get inside to service it very often, as the eco-drive movement powering this will likely last decades without any tinkering. Additionally, this odd case format has the side effect of wearing extra flush to the wrist, which is always appreciated. Now, the Promaster Tough line of watches has been around for what seems like forever, with most sharing these same basic characteristics and comparable super legible dials that you could probably read from space. The low light performance is mega too. Nevertheless, there seem to be two basic types that Citizen is selling right now depending on region. In some territories like the US, the mainline watch is the regular Promaster Tough, which is very similar to this, just with a wider dial, a 41mm case, and a mere 200 meters of water resistance. Other places like Europe seem to now have this super tough variant instead, which is a tad smaller at 40mm with a thicker bezel and slightly elevated aquatic performance. Do these differences matter? No, not really. As far as functionality goes, they both accomplish the same thing. What I will say is I think the Super Tough is a tad sleeker and better looking, especially in this khaki green colorway. So if you have the options and are torn between the two, I'd go with the latter. The sapphire crystal on this model is good enough, or at least doesn't impact legibility to a meaningful degree, and the titanium bracelet is serviceable with that diver's clasp effectively acting as a micro adjustment system. This is easily the most recommended Citizen watch from my viewers over the last 5 years, though I would still expect some battle scars on that titanium case. But I guess for a watch of this style, that's part of the charm, eh? Now we come to the final section, the one I'm most proud of, dress watches. And I say that because we have some absolute bangers in here that I think you're going to be really impressed by. An honorable mention goes out to the Calendrier Moon Phase. Sadly, I ran out of money before I could buy that one for testing, but I will say, for under £500, that dial looks straight out of a horticulturology magazine with a bunch of intricate detailing. I'm not sure if I love or hate it, but it certainly makes a statement, especially in that salmon color. Another watch that certainly makes a statement is this, the Citizen Stiletto, also known as the Cerato in some regions. This watch is so good, it's basically unfair. Remember earlier when I said there was a watch thinner than the already thin Axiom? Well, this is it. There's no editing trickery going on here. This thing is 4.9mm thick. 4.9mm. That's less than half of most quartz watches. The final result is the ideal dress watch form factor that makes a mockery of even the tightest shirt cuffs. If the Axiom was wafer thin, I guess this one's paper thin. Now, it's not perfect. The 12 and 6 are presented in a slightly questionable font, and all the applied details are flat. To be fair, their flatness is probably on purpose here. The Stiletto isn't just a one-trick pony though. The dial in particular was quite the unexpected surprise. While it wasn't nearly as dark as in the stock images, which was frustrating, the in-person appearance was actually more impressive, with a vertical bark-like pattern that changes drastically in different lighting conditions. And surprisingly, the specs don't particularly suffer to accommodate the radical thinness. You still get 5-bar water resistance, a decently finished steel case, a sapphire crystal, and by some minor miracle, an eco-drive solar-powered movement squeezed under the hood. How that was fitted in, I'll never know. While very skinny, the rather wide dial makes this 38mm look more like a 40mm on wrist. Though it's hard to draw any comparisons, as this Citizen wears unlike anything else I've tried, or anything else in its price bracket for that matter. I've even tested the 5.7mm Swatch Skin series, but this Citizen is on a whole different level. It looks and feels insane. Let's be honest, this is the type of watch that Seiko would have charged you $3,000 for. $300 is just wild value for money that not even the Chinese brands can match yet. On the subject of value, here are two great budget choices, the BM8240 and the NH8350. For half the price of the Stiletto, you can still get a pretty solid dress watch from Citizen. The BM8240 is one of the most purchased Citizen watches on sites like Amazon, primarily because it's a quintessential classic dress watch that's just good enough to avoid sucking in any areas, all for a low price. A decent minimum viable dress watch, if you will. Now I purchased this one used for ridiculously cheap, hence the nicks and the raggy strap, but you can see what I mean here. This watch has clearly seen a ton of use, but the strap is still holding together, the case is doing okay, and the eco-drive movement is still ticking away with no issues. While the markers are basic by modern standards, the overall design is still a winner, despite the fact that this model has been in production for over a decade. Indeed, this is one of the few on this list that predates Citizen's recent renaissance. In person, the dial has an enamel-like super glossy sheen, which looks much better than in the dated stock images, and the minimalist layout is bob-on for a formal dress watch that may see more sporadic use. At around 36mm and only 8mm thick, its size also matches its vintage theming really well. This watch is available in several variants with differing dial textures and marker sets across the range, including some with different case colours too. In fact, the latter is probably the weakest part of this watch. The case isn't ugly per se, but it's certainly simplistic with a basic structure and entry-level polishing that won't wow up close. Overall though, it does its job quite well. That said, if something larger and more contemporary is what you're after, my second budget pick, the NH8350, may be more up your alley. This is available for around £100 on a variety of grey market sites, and basically gives you a super minimalist look with a colourful dial and a 39.7mm steel-clad package. Pre-pandemic, that combination wasn't super impressive, but since then it's become increasingly hard to find on a budget. What you see really is what you get with this one. It's arguably more fashion-forward than the previous one, albeit with a design that won't be winning any originality awards. It's essentially Citizen's answer to the tsunami of trash-tier fashion and designer watches you'll usually see at this price, with skinny hands, even skinnier markers, and that sporty, vibrant sunburst dial. Thankfully, this one is better than most of its direct competition, with a good weight, an automatic Miyota 8200 movement, a good brand name, and 5-bar water resistance that does make it feel like a more complete package. Most comparably priced options on Amazon, for instance, are only snapback quartz watches that are splashproof at best. Its weaknesses are, funnily enough, identical to the previous watch. While substantial in terms of feel, the case has some pretty boring polishing, and the hour markers again look very cheap under macro examination. It's also worth noting that some Chinese AliExpress brands already make viable alternatives to designs like this, often with improved specifications for similar money. Unlike the previous watch, the NH8350 ships by default on a mediocre steel bracelet. While it has some mini links and feels weighty again, the clasp forgoes any adjustment holes, which sucks. Something that doesn't suck is the next watch on this list. I took a complete punt on this model after spotting it deep in the Citizen website. This was supposedly released in late 2023, but I don't remember hearing anything about it. And I have no idea why. The watch in question is this, the EcoDrive 365. Now we'll get to the name in a moment, but strictly from a visual standpoint, this thing is both super quirky and super impressive at the same time. Obviously, you have this unusual angular 70s inspired steel case featuring hooded lugs and a bracelet with matching custom designed end links. The recessed crown tucks away perfectly on the right side, giving a very symmetrical look, and this version has a smooth black bezel framing the sapphire crystal and dial beneath. For a solar quartz watch, it feels remarkably sturdy, with an inset screwed case back and an assuring in-hand feel, which is elevated further by the perfectly suited radial brushing and two polished lips atop the lugs. So many times in recent years, I've found myself concluding that the original version of a watch looks better than the reissue. It seems to be a recurring theme. This is an exception. Indeed, the 365 is technically a reissue of a 1973 quartz watch, though I'd say it's a huge step up. The dial here is the real star of the show, with a variety of glittering accents that give you a starry night sky effect whilst retaining the EcoDrive solar charging functionality, another edge this model has over the original. It looks glorious, even up close, and is aided in its efforts by the gunmetal chapter ring, which houses an array of intricate, three-dimensional overhanging hour markers that instantly grab your attention. I suspect that outer ring is actually where it takes in light as well. Of course, that brings us to the namesake feature, the E365 movement. Introduced specifically in tandem with this watch, this is a pretty bonkers inclusion for a watch that's currently selling for under £400 at the time of recording. Now, solar movements as a whole are already impressive to me. Having your watch last months from a short stretch in the sun already feels like magic. But the E365 caliber takes this to a whole new extreme. As the name suggests, from a single solar charge, this watch lasts an entire year. 365 days with no further sunlight required. Undoubtedly, this is really cool tech, though I don't think it's quite as impactful as it sounds. If you wear a solar watch semi-often, you'll likely not run into any power reserve issues anyway, as the watch will naturally get recharged. but for a dressier piece that may sit in a drawer for a couple of months at a time, well, that could be the difference between the watch being short on power or ready to throw straight on. So who knows, maybe there is some use for it. As part of the modernization process, the 365 was given a size bump to 42.8mm, which is a larger uptick than many retro reissue watches. That said, the extremely short lug-to-lug length does offset this somewhat, with a squat fit akin to a typical 41mm watch. So yeah, this one might be more wearable than you think. That 22mm bracelet is good too. It's got solid links throughout, a milled clasp, and a reasonable adjustment range thanks to the two mini links being just so small. No real need to change it, especially with how well it suits the look. This new iteration originally launched in 3 colors, including a ruby-laden limited edition, which was much pricier and is now sold out. Thankfully, the 2 remaining colors are half the cost and arguably more tastefully done. In the few YouTube reviews that do exist, I saw some complaints about daytime legibility. Now that may apply to the black version with its darker markers and hands, but I personally had no trouble with this silver one in real-world usage. I guess their issues are more likely to do with subpar YouTube lighting setups than anything else. Still, the absence of lume is a bummer. Is it a deal breaker? Well, I don't think so. Just like the Stiletto, the EcoDrive 365 both looks and feels like a luxury watch without being priced like one. I wouldn't put it technically on that level, but it still has to make this list. It's linked in the description alongside all the others, as well as the special deal with our sponsor Daily Watch. And on screen are even more cheap watches that look expensive, this time from Casio. Go check it out.